Hello, everybody. Welcome to this ninth episode of our online seminar series called Revisiting 10 Key TANTlab Papers. Today's topic is mapping algorithms, which we will discuss through a recent paper written by Anders Munk, Mathieu Jacomy, Mathilde Ficozzi, and myself. Before introducing the paper and the workshop, let me just say that I'm very pleased to see all of you. No online seminar series without audience. And please know that we will be recording these sessions and that you can find them later on the YouTube channel of the Techno-Anthropology Lab. My name is Torben Elgaard Jensen. I'm a professor of STS and the leader of the Techno-Anthropology Lab. I'm also one of the three hosts of this seminar series. The two other hosts are Mathieu Jacomy, who you cannot see. Now you can see him a little bit on the screen. There he is. Mathieu is a developer of digital tools and an assistant professor in the lab. And the third host is Matt Artz, who is located in Philadelphia, where he works as an AI product manager. Matt is a great friend of the lab and also a mover and a shaker of the American field of applied anthropology. So very great to have him on board as well. So why are we doing this seminar series on previous TANTlab papers? Why are we revisiting these papers one at a time? The key explanation here is simply the term revisiting. We discuss these papers because they raise interesting issues, but they don't really settle them. Often the things that are discussed, the juries are still out, and the issues live on and take new twists and turns all the time. And this very much includes something like mapping algorithms or mapping controversies. So today's paper is obviously a very good example of quite a live issue. It explores how to map the ever-evolving landscape of algorithms. The thing with algorithms is that as ordinary citizens, we hear a lot about them all the time, but often through the news media, and these stories often come with a solid dose of either hope or hype. But today's paper takes a very different track to this or approach to this. It makes a quite huge and systematic effort to track how algorithms are being talked about by researchers in the scientific database Scopus. And this, it turns out, gives us quite a different set of stories about what algorithms do and what algorithms are. We begin each of these sessions or seminars with an author interview. So Matt will interview Anders Munk, who is the first author of the article, and who was also at the Techno-Anthropology Lab from the very beginning in 2012 to 2024. Matt will try to tease out how Anders thinks about the mapping of algorithms in the specific way that it is done in this article. After the interview session, we invite all of you to join the discussion. Before handing over to Matt and Anders, let me just briefly properly introduce today's paper. The title of the paper is Beyond Artificial Intelligence Controversies: What are algorithms doing in the scientific literature? It was published in Big Data and Society in 2024 as a part of a special issue on analyzing artificial intelligence controversies. The authors are Anders Munk, Mathieu Jacomy, Mathilde Ficozzi, and Torben Elgaard Jensen. That's myself. So again, a warm welcome to everybody. And without further ado, I will hand over to you, Matt and Anders.
Thanks, Torben. Okay, so jumping right in. So honestly, the first thing, and this is really, I guess, all of you, right? First thing I want to say is, particularly when looking at this paper, though when looking at many over the years, I'm always struck by your maps, and particularly in this paper, right? Quite compelling, both intimidating and inspiring. Not always sure how you do reach the end state that you do, but cheers. It's great work. It's very lively, and I hope to kind of get into a little bit on that. But before we get there, um, as always, honestly, we've been having everybody sort of set the context for sort of viewers who might look at this later. So you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the origin story? Why did you choose to take this on at the time you did? How did it come to be? And just a little bit about the research project itself.
Yeah, so thanks, Matt. Thanks, Torben. It's great to be here. The project was part of a very large Danish research collaboration called Algorithms, Data and Democracy. In fact, it's still part of that, where Torben, among other co-PIs, are over a period of 10 years exploring in a multitude of facets what algorithms and artificial intelligence will mean for society, with a Danish focus, of course, but also, I think, in general. And we were tasked as one of the first work packages with providing internally for the project actually a controversy mapping of the way AI is discussed and issuified across various media. And we were tasked with doing that because we were going to organize a series of data sprints across the work packages in the project. So if you're not familiar with data sprints, this would be workshop-like events over several days where people who have a stake in a problem, in this case the researchers studying societal impact of AI in different ways, would meet around a data set and explore it. And so we were using that format to get everyone to have a sort of a common knowledge object to work on in the beginning. And through that collective exploration began also a collective discussion within the project on goals and interesting points of contention and so forth. So besides the scientific literature, we were actually doing a map. I think I have it somewhere here. I can just like a similar one to one you see in the paper, but just in a sort of the sprint state, which is all of the Danish news coverage of artificial intelligence, which we brought with us. And one of the things that this was back in 2021, was that AI is covered in very sensationalist ways, and often in either as sort of it's going to revolutionize business and fix the problems of the welfare state, or in even sort of fictitious ways, like, you know, the kind of AI you would know through Iron Man or the kinds of sci-fi movies or literature. There was nothing generative AI yet, but it was the whole doom and gloom boom kind of thing was already going on in Danish media. And we thought we wanted a counterweight to that. We wanted to figure out how experts were using AI in their research, or scientific experts were using AI and algorithms in their research. And this became further important, we thought, because there was a lot of other research coming out at the time, for example, from a project called Shaping AI, which showed across other countries, Canada, for instance, that this was the typical pattern in the way the news was covering AI, and hence it was interesting. And there was also calls in that literature that we should make the coverage more expert informed, because then we would become more situated, so less sensationalist, and we would see the actual controversies around AI better. And we thought, well, that's a good pretext for trying to map what AI is doing in the scientific literature.
Great, thanks. And also maybe very quickly, so since this is part of a special edition, could you just tell us a little bit about how that came to be? Meaning the article part of that. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that came to be and kind of where you sit in there?
Yeah, so we were organizing a session at the European STS conference together with the Shaping AI project, I think back in 2022, so right when we had done the first sprints, and it was on the controversial, we call it artificial intelligence controversies, and there was a deliberate pun in that title, right? Because our hypothesis was that some of these controversies are quite artificial. So it's not just the intelligence that's artificial, it's also the controversy, in the sense that STS has always thought that, or the anthropology of technology maybe, has always thought that the techno-scientific controversies are productive democratically. There are these moments in which the public are able temporarily to open the black boxes of technoscience and become aware of what they have a stake in current techno-scientific innovations. But our hypothesis was that the way, precisely because of the sensationalist discourse around AI, the controversiality of AI has also become detached from that kind of inquiry that we otherwise thought was productive about controversies. And so we decided to invite contributions for a special issue about artificiality in AI controversies. And it actually just came out the last, I think our introduction to that special theme in Big Data Society came out just a month ago. So it's been a long process, and it's part of that. Yeah.
Thanks. And you know, we're gonna unpack some of the findings over obviously the next 15, 20 minutes. But it does seem like the paper itself takes its own somewhat controversial view in that AI may not be as controversial as it seems. And without maybe going to all the details, because we're going to unpack that, would you maybe just set that frame up so that we can use that maybe as a guide to think about the conversation as we go?
Yeah, so without getting into too much details, I can just say the paper analyzes just over 1 million scientific publications from the 10-year period from 2011 to 2021. It's everything from the Scopus database that mentions algorithm, machine learning, or artificial intelligence in one way or another. Mapping what is going on topically in that literature, it's quite striking that controversy is almost absent, first of all. So it's not just that it's less sensationalist, because it's definitely less sensationalist. Like, that entire literature is characterized, I think, unsurprisingly, when you think of how scientific papers are written, it's characterized by concrete engagements with specific problems in specific situations. But it's almost exclusively algorithms in the role of solving problems. And even in the cases where algorithms are, the role played by algorithms in these papers are that they cause problems. So this could be like algorithms could be used to promote fake news or generate deep fakes, or even in those cases, almost exclusively the solution is another algorithm or form of AI that will help you either detect those fakes or moderate the feed on Facebook to make it less hateful, or so there's algorithmic solutions to almost all of the algorithmic problems, and in most cases actually even when you look at things like fake, so of course nowadays we talk a lot about deep fakes, but machine learning was used to detect all kinds of non-AI fakes, like fake banknotes or fake ceramics or fake green tea, or I think we have this whole plethora of fakeness that can be cured with AI in the corpus. So, I mean, in conclusion, if you take the scientific literature as your empirical ground, then AI is not particularly controversial. No. That's, of course, a very important qualification. You should not just take the scientific literature as your ground, but if that's what you're interested in, that's the conclusion.
Thanks. So now let's go kind of back and maybe pick some of that apart. So one, media at the time kind of often hyping both positive and negative. You do reference the AIC database showing like a 26% growth, right, in controversies over 11-year period, I think it is. Right. So there's that external context. You're sort of digging into the data. You pull all of these articles from Scopus. What strikes me about some of that is that certainly being in the space, I too would maybe have, a thought on what you would have seen in there, but you actually saw, what popped out was very different. So I'd like to get into the mapping, eventually working our way to the sort of main themes that pop out. But before getting there, you already described this, pulling down the data from Scopus. Could you talk though a little bit about the mapping process, some of the decisions you made, the sort of iterations along the way, as an iterative methodological process. What did you discover? Where did you pivot? Just help us kind of understand that process.
Yeah, so maybe just before I get into that, I should just say that the AAIC database you're referencing there is an independent initiative reporting on AI incidents as they occur in the news. And it's not a 26% increase, it's a 26-fold increase, actually. So it's like, there's been a massive explosion in what the public perceives as AI problems. That's undisputable. So that just to say that it makes it even more striking that what we find in the scientific literature. Now, the way we approached this was in a very tried and tested manner. So we applied a method we have applied many times before, and that others in the digital methods community have applied many times before, which consists in getting a lot of text, in this case, abstracts from Scopus, so it's the abstract text, and then extracting keywords from that text, and also from the titles, I believe. So this would be doing something called part of speech tagging. So we would let an algorithm figure out what is nouns, verbs, and so forth in the grammatic structure of the sentences, and then we would pick out nouns that are, and also noun phrases, things that are designated as nouns. Maybe there's an object to it as well. I think we also used the keywords that the authors themselves can designate to their articles. But anyway, it gives you like an inventory, a list of keywords for each abstract that is like you could say it represents the thematic content of the paper. So it'll tell you if this is about some specific type of cancer or whatever. And then we use those bags of words to conduct keyword analysis, co-word analysis. This is a technique that's been used in controversy mapping since the 80s. Now we're just doing it digitally, which consists in mapping how these keywords co-occur in the abstracts. So if two keywords co-occur, they become linked. And if they co-occur a lot, if they are used together in a lot of abstracts, I don't know, like a specific type of cancer and image recognition are two keywords that are used a lot. It could be breast cancer and image recognition used a lot together in many different papers, then the link becomes stronger. And that gives us a network of keywords connected by stronger or weaker links. We can then filter that, so we can say, well, we're only interested in the links that have a certain strength. So if only a few papers in the context have made that link, maybe it doesn't tell us something substantially about trends in the corpus. And so we map using two types of algorithms. One is an algorithm for visualizing this network. So it's a force vector spatialization algorithm that places the keywords in 2 dimensions based on how well connected or not connected they are to each other. I can show you in a second. And then we use a community detection algorithm to find groups of very densely connected keywords. And we found 230 of such groups across, I believe, from the top of my head, across the corpus. That then allows us to say, well, here is something that we will call a topic that we should explore further. And maybe I should just show you at this point. You can see this is I'm not expecting you to read it, but I'm just giving you a sense that if I zoom out here, you can see that's the entire corpus of keywords. And if I let you look closer, you can see we've started to write stuff on top of each of those little clusters of keywords. And the stuff we're writing on top is basically our qualitative interpretation of what goes on there. And so that requires us to move from keyword exploration to reading actual abstract text, because of course you can try and guess that when it says breast cancer and image recognition, maybe this is about mammographies or things like that. But in many of these cases, you can really not guess it, and probably you should not guess it. You should always read the qualitative context. So we developed a method for sampling publications that are representative, that are very typical of these clusters. So this consisted in finding papers that had a specific number of triads, so 3 keywords connected that were in those clusters. We had an elaborate pipeline for selecting smaller piles of documents that we could read for each cluster, which we then did. Fortunately, Mathilde, who is also in the call, was an intern in the lab at the time and spent basically her internship doing this analysis. It took 3 months, I think, to read through 235 piles of scientific papers and write a little vignette for each of them. And that gives us the first layer of analysis, where you can then look at that and go, so what is it, like what are, each vignette describes something that AI is doing in science. That was the object of writing the vignette. And then you can look at it and go, well, weirdly, there's not a lot of, well, if you're used to the News Digest at the time, or if you've seen the 26-fold explosion in reported AI incidents, then it's interesting to see that none of these topical clusters are about AI problems. It's not like there's an ethics cluster and a bias cluster or anything like that, right? They are about, topical areas in which AI play a role. Mm-hmm. And so the last layer of analysis for us was to say, well, maybe we're missing something with our elaborate semantic mapping here. Maybe we should look specifically for the kind of problems that AI is reported to cause. So we went through this AAIC incident database that has this 26-fold increase. We found the 15 most reported issues over that period, or was it 18? It's in the paper. We made a query, like a search query for each of them. So one of them would be gender bias, one of them would be racial bias, one of them would be dual use, there could be fairness, explainability, so forth, right? All of that is already classified for us in this incident database. We have a query for each of them. We look specifically by searching the corpus to understand, well, can it really be true that there's no talk about this? And of course, there is talk about it. It's just that, for example, when we look for fakes, you realize that, well, fakeness is an issue. Fake news, for example, is an issue. Deep fakes is an issue. But it is actually, in the scientific literature, it's mostly fakes produced by other means than AI, but solved through machine learning. And that is a pretty consistent pattern across all the issues we look through, even in things like, cyber. So in cybersecurity, for example, generative AI is suggested in the scientific literature as a solution. Like you could use generative AI to generate so many deep fakes that you could confuse the enemy. Like that would be a cybersecurity strategy. Or in ethics, like there could be an algorithm for making ethical choices in various kinds of medical treatment that would be more objective and more fair than when humans do it, right? So we can find discussions about ethics, we can find discussions about bias as well. Like, yes, there is machine bias, but machines can also help us address places where there's human bias, according to these publications. And so in each of those 18 or 15 cases, algorithms are a solution as much as, and if not more than, they are the cause of the problems.
Thanks. And so let me ask, and again, appreciating was pre-gen AI. Were you shocked yourselves by the findings where like there's themes that popped out really largely were this sort of disciplinary kind of groupings or the sort of applied versus foundational? Did you expect that, or was that a shock to you all as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they are disciplinary in the sense that they don't necessarily neatly follow the categorizations you would find in Scopus. Like it's not like we have a chemistry and a physics and in that sense. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and that is expectedly. That's how it looks in any other kind of literature you study. You realize that in some cases you have interdisciplinary fields where it's more the problem than the discipline that defines how people write, which is fine. I think what was surprising to all of us was the relative, how small, I wouldn't even say like you could say the ethical discussion, the societal discussion. You could just, any kind of sort of societal perspective on AI is pretty absent. Like that's a really small corner of that map. And on this level of just semantic clusters is mainly things like, then you'd have to count things like text analysis as like a societal cluster, like because it's about stuff humans do. Otherwise, it's remote sensing or vehicle planning or whatever. So it's we were surprised about that, to find so relatively little of it in there. I think there's always the question, we always have to remember that there's scale here. So it's not that you can have hundreds of papers on ethics and they're just not it's just not a lot in a corpus of a million 1.2 million scientific publications. And if they are not consistent in the topic they deal with, like in the language, then they don't show up as a semantic cluster in our map. So you have to be mindful of that. But then I think we address that by going spearfishing for these particular issues where we know AI is a problem. And I think that is what makes the analysis interesting ultimately.
Thanks. And so, in that spearfishing, it reminds me of another decision, or that phrasing reminds me of a decision you made. So you looked at, initially you were looking for artificial intelligence or algorithms, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And you were making the point that, you were worried about maybe using other terms, other keywords that maybe you would be very familiar with because it may be a reflection of your own field, your own biases, the work you're engaged in, and maybe not representative of everything. The spearfishing activity is sort of the same way, where you could almost today there could be an argument to be made. People would challenge it that you could use an LLM to sort of write synonyms of keywords and use that to help sort of uncover others, almost to sort of build your search strategy. Did you appreciating we're still pre-LM largely, right? Did you consider anything like that of potentially branching out from ethics, right? And or considering bias, attached to that and then sort of bundling those. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so let's separate two different things. So there's how do we build the corpus, which I think is the territory, like what's the data set we're looking at. And that's where we made the choice to just stay with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and algorithm as search terms. Because you could have written neural network or other kinds of techniques, deep learning, that you would know would get you the kind of literature we were looking for. But we were worried that we would know specific types of keywords and not others. And so we needed something generic to say, yes, we know we're going to miss something, but at least we know we're going to miss something in relatively equal ways across the corpus. I have to say, it's also, almost none of the corpus use the term artificial intelligence. So it's almost all machine learning. That being said, then there's the question of what do we then search for afterwards? And this is where the keywords like ethics and bias and things like that come in. And this is not our keywords. Here we're repurposing an NGO that monitors AI incidents in societies, their language, trying to translate it into queries that will work in the scientific literature. So I think there we had a method. You can argue whether that method is good enough or whatever, but we had a way forward in terms of not just saying, we're going to look for the problems we expect to be in there. We could piggyback on the AIC. Mathieu has a comment to that as well.
Yeah, I want to say, so that's how the map also comes into play in this story. Because we take one of those keywords from the NGO, like say ethics, but actually maybe there is an area of science that uses that word, but also other wordings of the same notion. Then assuming that there is kind of a semantic field in the papers that incorporates ethics, but there might be other ways to call it, then we would have kind of a cluster in the map. And when we do our analysis that looks for over or under representation of keywords, we would find that cluster, and then through it, because it's made of other keywords that are just emerging from the corpus, we have a chance to find those other alternative keywords. Or there is no cluster, in which case there's not much, it's not in the map as a semantic field. So the map is also in those kind of qualitative back and forth. The map is helping you find a ground that may be broader than just the terms you use. It gives us a chance to find some things we didn't expect.
And I could also add that the pre-LLM method for this, well, of course you're right. Today it's finding synonyms for things are trivial, but there were ways, right? So what has been done in other projects is you first get the corpus that is anything on AI and LLMs, and then you get all the frequent keywords from that corpus, and then you snowball and you have more keywords. That was a function of time, I would say. So we needed to get this. This was first and foremost the publication. It's a little rough to call it an afterthought, especially since Mathilde spent half a year annotating all the clusters, but it was an afterthought in the sense that we first and foremost had to deliver a map for these sprints. And so just getting the full corpus from Scopus was a 6-week process of Johan Søltoft, another scientific assistant in the lab at the time, sort of nursing a computer that was calling the Scopus API without getting kicked off. And then just getting a network visualization of this scale done, I think was a first. I'm looking at Mathieu, who did it and who has done many of these. So there was a lot of firsts here, and having to snowball the keywords as well was just a step too far for us at the time, practically. Yeah.
Understood. And I guess where I'm going with that all is, one of the things I always, and I've said this a lot on these calls, is that I appreciate the way you all make the process sort of visible in the papers, and all these are decisions, right, that need to be need to be decided on, and they often come up iteratively, and it's not like we know what we want to do at the outset, right? And I think there's a teachable aspect there, right, to many of your papers, and just having the conversation about the very subjective and sort of performative nature of some of this work. But thanks for that. For the sake of time, I want to get into one last topic, and then we do need to open it up. So paper kind of starts, somewhat maybe positioning like the idea, do we need more expert-informed opinions in media coverage? You look at the scientific abstracts, you sort of see that they themselves sort of treat it more as problems, to approach the topic more like solutions to problems, different than the media does, but maybe also not the solution to the problems per se in the media, right? The papers themselves have their own sort of perspective on AI, and you come to this sort of wording and kind of conclusion at the end on the uncontroversial hinterlands, which to me speaks to something in my own life where, like, when building products, AI products, the problems we're often trying to solve are much more situated, often much more mundane, much less controversial, much less around the hype. And so could you speak to that sort of ultimate conclusion, what you found and how it relates to the concept of political situations?
Yes. So I think, first of all, this is something that's still super relevant today in the way you see large language models, generative AI discussed. And it comes in several layers. First of all, I think it's interesting to see that we know this from talking to people who have their hands stuck in the in the meatballs here, that they will all say we have to stop talking about AI as if it was one thing. Like AI is many different technologies. It's not just ChatGPT or LLMs or like, and each of those technologies have their own issues and problems, and then comes the various ways in which they are applied or used or misused or regulated and so forth. And so it's really not should really not be pro or con AI. And maybe we should just stop saying AI. Like Lucy Suchman has a commentary in the special issue, which is called Against the Thingness of AI. And I think she makes a very good point about the damaging effects of this talking about AI as if it's one reified technology. So there's that, but there's also the wish for, if we could just get the experts, a more expert informed debate, which is a call you see often and repeatedly. And it is often associated with this idea that then we would really appreciate how dangerous it is or how controversial it should be. And it's of course true that you can find there are, a lot of AI critique comes from academia, from people who have spent time thinking carefully about the societal consequences of AI. And so rightfully, a lot of that critique is of course expert informed. But it's just, if we really take seriously that you wanted to include democratically the scientific expertise on AI, then it's just a much bigger beast where, it's also probably instrumental to solving many of the pressing societal issues in other fields. So, this is where the uncontroversial hinterland and the political situation come in. So the political situations is a concept that comes from Andrew Barry as a critique of early STS engagement with controversies, where it's very much like, well, you start with one technology being controversial, like a GMO or a flood model or a vaccine, and then you develop from there. And then it's, well, all of these are part of bigger technological zones where maybe the controversy is not the full story. And following the controversy will not get you the full story. And I think the way you see that here is that if you only try to follow the AI controversies, you don't get that without machine learning, we would not be able to distribute the energy signal from renewable sources in our energy systems, for example, right? So because you have fluctuating energy production from wind turbines and solar and so forth, you need algorithms to manage that. This is the same for any kind of signal processing. This is the same in cybersecurity. This is the same for how you control air traffic. This is the same for how you produce a weather forecast or monitor earthquakes or do volcanology or do treatment in almost any kind of healthcare, or how genetics works as a scientific field, right? So there's all these other domains where machine learning is just uncontroversially a part of how you advance that science, and they are also tied into important societal discussions. And it's not that I don't think we provide a fix for that, but I think the paper constitutes one brick in understanding why maybe talking about AI controversies is a little bit artificial. Like we could talk about a controversy about using a LLM-based chatbot in schools. Is it a good pedagogical tool? That's a controversy, right? But that does not equate artificial intelligence controversies. They are often controversies about other things and often uncontroversial, and yeah.
Great, thanks. So I would love to ask a few more things, but given the time, we definitely should open it up. Thank you, Hannes and team, for touching on that. Who wants to jump in? Torben?
You're muted.
Yes, thank you very much, Anders, and Mathieu and Mathilde for the writing process we had around this paper, and thanks, Anders, for taking us through the journey. I think it's some of the last things you said about what is this paper is it a fix or is it a brick or whatever it is. I think it sort of just made me think that you and also Mathieu have been in this game of controversy mapping for like 15, 20 years now or something. So you really sort of experienced a whole lot of development in the field and contributed importantly to it. And I think I don't know. I'm curious about how you would tell sort of the long tail of the field. I can just sort of sketch some what to me are milestones. I think like in the early days, like 2010s, there was a bit of quite a big optimism about all the new data sort of shared with other big data optimism about what would it now be able to understand about society by tracing all these data. And there was a lot of technical invention in order to be able to gather that. But then along the way, sort of various types of problems, challenges came up. So on the one hand, it became obvious that all the data you could get, there was sort of media effects of various sorts. It was not just sort of the direct positivist connection to the world. There were even sort of artificial intelligence or artificial controversies like specific actors that were trying to plan specific controversies. There's also the problem that we've been discussing in the session on participatory data design, on how do you actually engage people in the kind of maps you do. And now with this paper is bringing up the issue that maybe controversy mapping is only sort of one side of the coin, but there are other kinds of mapping that could and should inform the debate. So there are all sorts of both technical development in the relationship between the mapper and the audience, and also an increased sort of change in what is the media landscape in terms of manipulation, in terms of bots, in terms of data sets becoming more proprietary, the rise of platforms and all that. So there are lots of things have been going on the last 20 years. I'm not saying all of this leads up to the moment of this paper, that would be too much, but still, I wonder if you could reflect on the sort of the longer history that you have been through, and perhaps place the paper in that. I know that's a huge question, but on the other hand, I know these questions are on your mind. So
yes, I'll go first, and then I want Mathieu to give his version as well. I think first of all, I think the early days is not 2010, but 1984 maybe, or those first cohort analysis papers, which are, I believe, 83, 84, which belongs to a period where controversy analysis, but that was actually controversy mapping. They were mapping semantic patterns in the scientific literature, much like what we're doing here, just by hand. But it belonged maybe to a broader strand of controversy analysis, and that I would categorize sort of in the 80s and 90s as being about the controversy as a fruitful situation. So it's like the controversy is a moment when you can study how technoscience is actually made and not just get the textbook version. And it was sort of rather not about society yet, or not about the public at least. And I think what happens maybe we should also add that it also begins as a pedagogical movement, right? So it's a way of teaching engineers that philosophy of science in a different way, basically. Now, I think what happens in the zeros is both the digital methods movement you described, but also that STS more broadly becomes interested in publics and rediscovers the Dewey-Lippmann debate through the work of Norge and others. And so this is, Making Things Public book, for example, which has its 20 years jubilee this year, where it becomes about, well, how can controversy mapping be useful for the democratic public that is doing its inquiry? And somehow the marriage of digital methods and controversy and the interest of the public in the beginning becomes translated to, let's map the public. This will be useful for the public. Which is why, you would go on Twitter and Facebook and websites to begin with and understand how the public is doing inquiry. But I think what you're also realizing, and and this belongs to the participatory data design story, like through projects like eMaps, for example, when it becomes clear that it's not so easy to you don't just do a map and throw it at the public and they go, thank you, now, here's a great map that I can use to navigate the situation I'm in. They typically just don't care. So you need to get them on board. You need the slogan is, it becomes about the mapping rather than the map, right? It's about the process of mapping together with people. But then you realize that there are other things you could map. So for example, in eMaps, we map financial flows of adaptation aid in the climate adaptation controversy, because that's what those actors find interesting. And I think you could kind of compare it here to say, well, of course you don't expect the scientific literature to be where the controversy on AI is unfolding. Like, yes, there might be some really nerdy controversies on whether neural networks work one way or another in the 80s, but not the broad societal discussion on AI. So you have to make these kind of arguments that, well, it's interesting, it is relevant for the ongoing public conversation on AI to know what AI science looks like, because otherwise they get a too narrow view of it or whatever. But you're not per se in this project mapping direct people in direct opposition to each other. And that, I think, is actually quite indicative of where controversy mapping has moved. It's like, it's often this sort of the digital mapping is showing some broader landscape, and then you situate through other interventions. Why is this relevant for the ongoing controversy? I would say, I think I would oppose this idea that I don't think there was ever a naive idea that the data would just show you everything here. Like, I think that it was pretty evident, the idea that you would have to repurpose digital media with their biases and so forth was pretty, it sort of came in through digital. That was already evident in the early papers by Richard Rogers and Ortimaris and so forth. So the fact that it was not sort of early computational social science that informed controversy mapping in that period, but media studies made a difference, I think, to how you looked at that. And then, yes, it has become increasingly a practical problem, but I don't think, totally unexpectedly. Like, I think the idea that the media then acts in various ways on the terrain has been pretty much with controversy mapping from the beginning.
I would add that so every technique that is available, every tool is a platform, open-ended to some extent. Different people will do different things with it. So the reason we made this map that way is because we wanted a platform in the first place, as Anna said. But I want to comment on the fact that people may use these similar techniques nowadays to do controversy mapping, not because it's the best technique, and not because we think it's the best technique, or not even because they think it's the best technique. And by technique, I mean implicitly method, but rather because, for example, it's easier to do or cheaper and so on. So there has never been a discussion or the need of a discussion, I believe, between is this a good form of controversy mapping? Because that is not the question. Everybody knows that if you can just do it qualitatively, like even when we were doing that at Sciences Po with Latour, we would encourage the students to just go make actual their own interviews of the actors, go there, see and report on what they see. And controversy mapping was meant to be that. But the reason why it drifts towards this kind of maps doesn't come from us proposing those techniques. It comes from people wanting to have a cheaper research design that they can unfold with less efforts and less money to find, whether that is a good reason or not. That's a force we can do nothing about, I believe. But we can try to make the tools good. But I think that making those tools good entails drifting away from certain forms of qualitative controversy mapping and towards other things. Then we could develop that into why would Latour, for example, in the first place, why was he interested in doing such maps? And this ties into his Dardian vision. I'm not going to develop that point, but maybe
we should develop that point just a little bit, because it's like, I think the marriage of the two, like, so I think we've talked about this these many months that Mathilde spent annotating the map already, right? So it's clear in the way we use it here, it's not particularly cheap or quick, or is in fact rather the opposite, right? but so why? Then you could ask, why would you do it? And I really feel that it's when done well, what we have here is it's a shot at the kind of digital traceability that the tool wanted to revive with his reading of Tart. Is that you could never have done a reading of those 1.2 million papers qualitatively and got to the same conclusions. That's just not possible. But you can, through the structured reading that the qualitative design offers you, you can choose to spend all that time, but at least it becomes within reach to say that we've now structurally read through all of it and we know what's in there, and it's 135 different things, and none of them are particularly controversial or staging AI as problematic. So it's just very important to say that it does not entail it's not a one-click method. It doesn't fulfill those dreams of the quick.
It's not the only method.
Tool, right?
It's too open-ended in a way.
Yeah.
So I would say we know what we've lost by not doing more qualitative inquiries, and we could do them in addition to that. Then, as you said, it's a question of how you use your time. But we don't know. So we know what we've lost, but we don't know yet what we may find at the end of the road of being able to unfold such methods in the right way. And these methods in this paper are already obsolete.
I have a quick follow-on to that, but if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free. Yep. Well, so if
hi.
nobody else, question?
Sorry. Yeah, it's a very brief one. So you said in the conversation about AI controversies, that's a big one as compared to using chatbot in schools. I just want to can you shed some light about what controversies you are talking about as compared to using chatbots in school?
Okay, so I was trying to say that I don't think you can have a controversy about AI because it's too general. It's too I mean, there is no such thing as AI in singular, but I accept that there can be very. And when I say a controversy, I mean in the classic STS sense that there's a specific piece of technoscience where the public starts to do inquiry on its consequences. And I think if you look at the debate as an example of where you see that, I would say, well, the debate we're currently having about if the use of chatbots as tutors in school is pedagogically ethical or pedagogically productive, I think that's a productive technoscientific controversy, but it's not about AI in general, right? So there are many other, AI could be so many other things. So you have to attend to the specificities of that discussion. You cannot just download generic arguments about AI and expect to enlighten or develop that specific controversy. In order to understand that, then you have to understand, well, how does a large language model work and how does it not work? And what happens when it gets integrated in a platform offered by an American tech company to a Danish primary school? And how can it not be integrated in a specific pedagogical tradition and so forth, right? Those are the specific questions you would have to ask to unfold that controversy, but you cannot, generic points about AI being biased or AI being whatever does not help you here. So, yeah.
If I may say that another way, analyzing AI as a political situation entails nowadays not only commenting on what new things AI has become, like generative AI, but also, and this is more invisible, what AI has ceased to be. So, for example, we could hypothesize that the classifier, just an algorithm that labels images as cats and dog or whatever, this used to be a state-of-the-art AI 10 years ago. AI was that. Now you could make the point, this is no more AI. This is, it would be derogatory. It would sound derogatory to call that AI. So these are things that are going to either exit the public debate or become framed in a very different way. Because AI has displaced, so we've not only extended it, but we've also lost some things. Some things have fallen off the train, and entire debates about bias and classifiers may just not be maybe obsolete and not debated anymore in the public debate. So, hence the question of whether you call AI the thing or you call AI what people call AI.
So the concept of AI is even evolving.
Absolutely. And also, of course, the socio-technical imaginary, so the way the worlds people have in their mind when they imagine AI. It was hard to imagine AI as thinking like a human, and we are closer to that. That's not saying we are closer to having AI that thinks like a human, but certainly people are loaded in their head with that much more now than before, I believe.
True. The AI is trying to be, the chatbots is trying to be like very human in nature. I'm working with Uber AI solutions and training the LLMs, and that's where I place myself over there. Thanks for the comment.
Thanks.
Torben?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for your reflections on my previous questions. It's really interesting to hear your long thinking there. I have also sort of a thing that struck me when I reread the paper was the notion of a agency that we are deploying in the paper. And I just want to hear your thoughts on this. It's I think the terms we use is something like, what kind of agency does AI have in the scientific literature, and referring explicitly to actor network theory. So and when you read the paper, it's you can sense specific kinds of agency, like does it indicate a controversy, or does it indicate a solution, or does it become a problem in itself, and so on. So those are kind of the dimensions of agency. And sort of when I read it, also in light of the current discussions about AI agency, which is sort of a completely different way of talking about it, there's this, sudden, or not, maybe an old fear. It is an old fear, back to Frankenstein. But there's also a new fear that suddenly AI can do something in itself that is dangerous, copy itself unexpected places, or start sending out deceiving messages, and so on. And I think sort of one way to think about that discussion is to say, well, maybe we should think about agency exactly in the very broad sense that actor network theory does, in terms of saying that agents can have all sizes and shapes. So micro actors can become macro actors, and so on. And the thing that is, I think, happening with AI that is perhaps not so visible in the scientific literature is precisely that AI is being sort of incorporated into all sorts of other things. So suddenly it becomes the strategy of an organization, or an object of investment, or part of a national strategy to gain hegemony of the world, or to create social order, or all these kinds of things. So AI, the agency that AI has is a much more than either being a controversy or a solution, but it becomes sort of a national symbol. It gets incorporated into all sorts of other things. So I wonder if you have any reflection on that, on the sort of, and maybe that's also part of a political situation, that AI gets sucked into all sorts of other things, projects and agencies, in pretty wild ways that are far beyond just being a solution or not. Does this make any sense to you? I don't know. But it's just, yeah, the agency of AI. Thoughts on that?
I think so just to bracket that first, like in the paper, we use it in relation to Maris's issueification concept, right? So it's like we're saying, well, issueification, which is like it's an updated version of the old problematization concept from actor network theory, is that this is what experts do when they establish themselves as an expert community, is that they first turn problems into problems in specific ways. And issueification makes the same point about the way the public engages with controversies, is that, well, first things have to be issueified, and that is where scientific experts play a pretty significant role, because one of the things they do is that they problematize those objects of contention for us in certain ways, and that determines how they can be debated afterwards, and so forth. So we say, well, when we're studying what algorithms do, agency, in the scientific literature, we're studying that as instances of issueification. Are they staged as a solution? Are they staged as causing problems and so forth? And I think the reason why the examples you come up with there, Torben, which I think are totally valid, was not really part of our vocabulary, is because that's not typically what you see in the scientific literature. However, I very much agree, and I think we also had those discussions while mapping the media landscape, is that there are other, we also had this sort of, that they have make a difference by declaration, right? Is that when you want to regulate, like just the fact that you regulate AI gives AI agency, right? It's like now after we've introduced the regulation, that means that now AI has makes practical differences in situations where it is not even there yet. It's just that people have to think about GDPR or the AI Act or whatever before they design their new product. And I've been in, actually, I think it was when we published the paper that we made an update about it on LinkedIn, I got into discussions with a lot of people in the AI debate about what we meant by agency, because it is such a contentious issue that, and I think the general line is, stop saying that AI has agency, or at least stop saying that generative AI has agency, because it implies it has intentions. And I had to sort of develop the idea that, well, from that's your definition of agency, but that's not how actor network theory thinks about agency. And so we're perfectly fine with dead beings without intention having agency. And so I think that's just an interesting tension with the general discussion on AI right now.
I'd like to underscore something else, which is that the technology we have now, which is even more recent than what we have in this paper, is not yet capable of doing qualitative inquiry at scale. If we actually went through reading these million abstracts qualitatively, the ways we could problematize the agency of AI would be so many, from people talking about it, from people performing it intentionally, not intentionally, and so on and so forth. There might be many effects we could be able to abstract qualitatively. Issueification is just one way that is relatively clean to operationalize. That's why we went for that. That's something you can kind of see from keywords, but it doesn't dry out the question of agency. Far from it, of course. It's just what we can do. I wish, but this might change. Like, we might have access to operationalizing multiple versions of retracing agency thanks to LLMs, for example, in the near future. I don't know. I think we will be trying.
Thank you. I think that this is a wonderful place to stop the discussion for now, with an indication of how we might do different things in the future, and that there's things that are definitely unsettled about agency. So thank you to everybody for attending, and thank you, Matt, for great interviewing as always, and thank you, Anders, for steering us through the paper. I think it's been really fascinating to both explore these maps, think about what it means to map algorithms, and also having sort of new, or having sort of a guided tour through the process of mapping and looking at this in various contexts. So thank you very much for attending to this. We have this was the 9th episode of this seminar series. There is a 10th and final episode on care and security, which will be on the 3rd of December. And I hope to see a lot of you there. So thank you for now.